It is a new era with the Atlanta Dream. The idea of a WNBA team that plays like FGCU has for the last couple of decades, really interesting. The man who's going to bring that vision to life, Karl Smesko, joins us. Locked on Women's Basketball starts now.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hi there and welcome to Locked On Women's Basketball. I'm your host, Howard Megdal, and I want to thank you for making us your first listen every day. Over 300,000 of you showed up for us in December 2024 alone, the way we show up for you 6 days a week. Of course, it's not just me, it is the entire team over at The Next, at thenexthoops.com. We have over 100 reported pieces every single month on the past, present, and future of women's basketball. Sign up today, $9 a month, $72 a year. Get them all delivered right to your email. It is the women's basketball network that we have always needed, and it is here. And my guest today, within the framework of covering women's basketball, we've had the privilege of covering Karl Smesko and his program at FGCU for the entirety of our time in existence. And of course, I've had the chance to do it many years before that. And Coach, before we get into some of the specific ways that FGCU played that I'm going to be fascinated to see carried over here into the WNBA, I just wonder how much you knew what it was like for opposing teams to see you on the double-digit seed list come NCAA tournament time, because no one treated it like, I mean, it got to a point, no one was like, oh, this is a surprise when you would go out and win. It was just like, oh, so that number 5 seed is now on death row. And I just like, do you know how much it was just felt like this deeply ominous thing across the women's basketball community?
I was aware of that because several coaches told me that they were always hoping it'd be anybody other than us. But, it was one of those things where every year I thought we were probably a legitimate 5 or 6 seed. And then when you're playing a 5 seed, you're going to get a great game in the first round. A couple of times it's 2 top 25 teams playing each other in the opening round of an NCAA tournament, which almost never happens. But that was just part of the NCAA process. There was, it was tough to get the kind of seed that maybe you deserved. And that always it just wasn't unfair to us. It was unfair to the teams that we were matched up against in the first round.
It's obviously something that you seem to feed off of. And again, for those who weren't familiar, it wasn't intermittent success. You just go through the wins year after year, 27, 31, 27, 24 in 2021, only because there were fewer games that year as people were coming back from COVID. Year in and year out, the system was working. You were producing pros. Did you ever get an explanation about sort of why there wasn't some sort of carryover effect on it? And was it something that more bothered you, or was more like a badge of honor for you on an annual basis?
The point that bothers you is if you didn't win your conference tournament, you would still be a top 25 level team, right, but you wouldn't even make it into the NCAA tournament. You'd be on the wrong side of the bubble. So when you didn't get the respect you deserved, it put a lot of pressure on you that you could not slip up in the conference tournament because you wouldn't even get a chance to go to the NCAA. So that part of it was definitely distressing and added a lot of stress to the season, because we all know anything can happen in one game, especially when you're playing somebody for a third time. And a lot of time conference tournaments are set up differently than the rest of the season. So that part was a little frustrating, but fortunately, most of the time we were able to take care of the conference tournament, get to the NCAA, and then, we just did what we could to prepare and give ourselves the best chance to win and advance in the NCAA tournament.
it was always a fascinating thing to see this team operate. And we're going to get more into that, especially into segment 2, getting more into the weeds. But for this move specifically, and when the Atlanta Dream made the decision to move on from Tanisha Wright, the idea was very offensively focused. So, when it was revealed that you are now the head coach, it just felt like the perfect fit for Dan Padover. What was interesting, and what a lot of people around the game were, I think, a little more surprised about, was this is not, putting it mildly, the first approach you've had from another prospective employer. And so I wonder, for you, take me through why now, what it was about this specific challenge that was particularly alluring to you for you to make a change at this moment.
I think it got to the point where I was ready for a new challenge, one. Two, I'm always been a big fan of the W and been very intrigued by the W, and it's something that if an opportunity were to open up in the W, that it would have been something that I would have considered. So, I mean, this whole process was, I heard from a search firm and they asked if I would be interested in speaking to somebody. They didn't even tell me which team, just told me it was in the W, and I said, yeah. And then I got a chance to talk to Dan and on the phone, and then all of a sudden it was in person, and we connected really well. We had the same vision for the future and how to build a championship level team. Then I met with ownership, Larry and Robin, and we had a great talk, and at the end it was like, we felt like the talk couldn't have gone any better. So I was hoping that officially an offer would come, and it did. And I just thought, who knows if I'd ever get another opportunity of doing something like this. Atlanta's a great city, a great organization. Getting a chance to join the W at a time where the W is exploding in popularity, I really just couldn't pass it up.
For those who don't know, it is understood across the basketball industry the chops you bring to this, right? And we talked about FGCU's success, but you were Atlantic Sun Coach of the Year so often. You get an individual trophy each time, right? Like where do you put them all? I think it was like 8 times that you won that.
I don't know the exact number, but they're in a box somewhere at this point.
Understood. So making this move at the time that you're doing is bringing not just a legacy of success, but an offensive philosophy that is different than what the WNBA has typically had. It feels like it's moving in the direction that you have been operating in. I feel like when I think about the changes, and there have been 7 over the course of this offseason of coaching, you and Lynn Roberts, I think, have a lot in common in terms of the way you think about offense, the way you put players in position to succeed with, the way she talks about good to great shots. And obviously you have done the same. I asked her flat out, she was on the podcast last month, she had fewer than 3% of attempts, either not at the rim or beyond, or in the paint or beyond the 3-point range. And you have similar numbers. Your shot charts are these things of beauty, right? Do you anticipate being able to replicate that in Atlanta? Do you have sort of benchmarks for what you want to reach as far as the, quote unquote, good to great shots go?
If we'll be able to replicate that exactly. And our players have different skill sets and talents, and we don't want to limit our players in terms of what they can do at a highly efficient rate. So just like all 3-point shots aren't equal, all shots around the rim aren't equal. Same with mid-range. Some mid-range shots can probably be done with a high level of efficiency. You're trying, one thing that doesn't change is you have to maximize points per possession. And one thing with Atlanta, they were last in the W in points per possession. So we do have to generate higher quality shot opportunities where we can get a higher return on each possession. So that's going to take a lot of people playing together. We're going to have to utilize our talent and the skill sets of our players in ways where it makes it easier for them to be efficient. But yeah, I mean, Similar philosophy in that we're trying to win and we're trying to get the most points per possession.
It is fascinating. And I have to point out 1.6% of your shots were outside of the paint, but inside of the 3-point line last year at FGCU, which were 30 all season, which is just an incredible mark of efficiency. And so I want to get more into how the rubber hits the road in segment two. Much more to come with new head coach of the Atlanta Dream, Karl Smesko. My name is Howard Megdal. You're listening to Locked On Women's Basketball. Locked On Women's Basketball is brought to you by FanDuel. And FanDuel, from the first whistle to the final drive, has ways of making the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. I mean, they keep upping the ante. Again, $5 bet. If you win, you get $300 in bonus bets that continue to do it. You can do it through the FanDuel app, which is easy to navigate and gives you an endless variety of bets to keep every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. There's no waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team, not an option for me, a Giants fan, but for many of you, your teams are competent in the front office and still playing. FanDuel has you covered, even if your team's out of the playoffs. It's a way to make things fun all the same. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with the $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Howard Megdal back here, Locked On Women's Basketball. And Karl Smesko, head coach of the Atlanta Dream. Like you've pointed out, and you pointed out in your introductory press conference, and Wilton Jackson wrote about it over for us at the Next, the fact that there's obviously unlocking offensive potential that's critical to taking the Dream where you want them to go. There's also a tremendous amount of talent that comes already. There was a really fun moment, I thought, during the press conference where Ryan Howard got to ask you a question about the ways in which you want to improve this team in 2025. Take me through your answer with her and just generally speaking, the way you think about philosophically, beyond even just a question of where you're getting your shots, about the ways in which to implement things to get better.
I mean, there's a lot to that. I mean, if you want to play, great basketball, there's a lot to it. But, with the players that we have, we're going to want to push the tempo. We're going to want to create maximum space on the floor. We're going to want the ball to move. And then we're going to want to work together to create advantages and then understand how to move once we create an advantage to extend that advantage and hopefully capitalize on it. We have some really talented players in Atlanta, and I think if we play to each other's strengths, I think one thing about the W is the margins aren't great. They're not huge margins in terms of efficiency. So small improvements can make a big impact in terms of winning. And I think, this will be a little different for me as, you have about 2 weeks to get a team ready. So this is just going to be a process of progress throughout the season. And, if you break the season down into 4 quarters, like 11 games a quarter, you want to see progress through each segment there and continue to improve so that you're the best at the end of the season. And I think we have the talent if we learn how to play together and create space and utilize that space properly. I think we have a chance to be much improved this year.
When you get into the question of pace, and I got a little bit ahead of where I was, so I appreciate the segue. Very nice. The ability to play faster, it wasn't necessarily something that was part of what you were doing at FGCU, and your pace numbers tended to be on the lower end. Do you think that's an imperative, a difference between college and pro game, that in order to get better shots and the WNBA, it needs to be played at a faster pace?
Well, I think you have to look for your transition opportunities. And like you said, our FGCU numbers in terms of pace, weren't like the highest pace, but that was a largely a function of the other teams. Like
Right.
the other teams were using entire shot clocks almost on every possession. One, because of good defense. Two, because they didn't want to run with us. Like we're usually one of the top 5 in the nation in terms of points in transition.
Correct.
So to do that combined with the pace numbers we have, that's pretty remarkable. But getting back to the W, I think there's a shorter shot clock. Teams are going to want to play with higher pace. So there'll obviously be less times where the other teams are trying to use an entire shot clock against you. So I really think that we could really pick up the pace, get better. We have the players that can really run and create things in conversion or transition, whatever you'd like to call it. And I think if we're going to get the most of our players, we have to put them in those positions and let them do what they do naturally, which is get out, go, and make good decisions.
So I wanted to get the exact number, right? And this per synergy, you guys were north of a point per possession in transition, but you were doing it 21.7% of the time. So to your point, and it's interesting because I just more of a philosophical question than anything else, right? Of, do you need to play quote unquote faster in order to generate the amount of transition opportunities that you need to in the WNBA, where it's easier for folks who are more athletic or faster to get back? Or, it doesn't seem like you think that balance necessarily needs to change.
We obviously don't want to give up transition opportunities, so we're not pushing the ball at all costs that we're going to give up easy baskets in transition.
Mm-hmm.
So, the other team's pace may be slower if we guard things correctly, we communicate well, we force a tough 2. But when we get the ball, we want to challenge you in transition, see if you can get back. If we can get a good shot in the first 5 seconds, we'll take it. If not, we'll continue to, run multiple actions until we can get, what we consider an advantage shot, or, we call them ATLs
Right.
at FGCU, which, obviously we're moving to the ATL. But it just means above the line, which means shots that we consider high quality where we expect a high return.
And clearly have some players who are already positioned to get them. I don't know, and maybe this is something for later on and closer to training camp, but have you had a conversation with everyone about the fact that everyone is now a shooter positionally?
We haven't done that, but I have had conversations with almost all the players, and I just got back from Australia where I got to spend some time with our players and talk to them. And one thing that I've been really impressed with is our players, their maturity, their willingness and openness to, they want to be good, so they're willing to try some different things. So I'm really eager to getting started with them.
With Ryan Howard specifically, here's somebody who was drafted as a franchise cornerstone, somebody who has displayed this broad range of skills on both ends of the court. What is the most important thing you think you can unlock in her game going into 2025?
Be a big key for us. I mean, we have a lot of talented players, and we have players that can score and help complement. But I really think Ryan should be an all WNBA type player, and we get to the point where she's in MVP conversations. I think she has that type of ability. Now, putting her in position where she has the opportunity to get into space, make decisions with it, get her more opportunities where she gets closeouts and advantages on the catch rather than having to do so much work after the catch, is something that, the coaching staff will have to get together. And, one thing that I thought was really important when I took the job is to make sure that, we hired quality assistants that knew the W, that I'm definitely eager to learn from. And that's, one thing that we've been able to accomplish already. Latoya Sanders and Brandy Poole, they have a wealth of experience in the W. And I think when we get together, those are the conversations we're going to have, is how can we maximize her talent and put her in the best position to be the most productive to help us win. I think we're really hoping that if we have the right concepts, that this could be a year where we see Ryan explode on the scene and becomes that MVP candidate.
Latoya and Brandy got two of the very best. So that's going to be a fascinating staff and a really interesting cauldron of ideas. I also just want to touch on, before we get to our next break, Alicia Gray. And, she has been another player who's a little bit overlooked, I feel like, within this league in terms of her efficiency, in terms of what she's brought to the table. But it took a long time for her even to reach an all-star game. And so from that perspective, from my view, it almost looks like she's the most Karl Smesko player on this Atlanta Dream roster that you're coming in and seeing. Do you view her in a similar way? And, what is sort of the next step in your view for her evolution as well?
Love the way she plays. I mean, she defends, she gets after it, she'll attack the rim, she can make threes. She's fantastic, and she's an all-star level player. And like Ryan, getting her in position where she has more space and more advantages on the catch is going to be something. And hopefully having Rye and Leash work together to create confusion for the defense and put the defense in tough situations, both in terms of guarding them, but also just the communication involved in defending both of them, I think could really help them create easier opportunities for themselves where they don't have to do quite so much to get the shot. It'd be nice if once they caught it, a lot of the work was already done.
Yeah. I mean, it's Alicia's point per possession on catch and shoot opportunities per synergy, and that's true guarded or unguarded, which is just
pretty remarkable.
It's a crazy number. All right, back. Final thoughts with Karl Smesko of the Atlanta Dream. Right after this, I'm Howard Megdal. You're listening to Locked On Women's Basketball. Locked On Women's Basketball is brought to you by Prize Picks. Basketball season is heating up, and there's no better way to get real money action while watching your favorite stars than Prize Picks. Whether it's college women's basketball season or the National Basketball Association, NBA, it's a men's league. Where they play professional basketball. Prize Picks makes it easy and fun to turn your basketball knowledge into cash. So pick more or less of at least two players each time you play for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. You think LeBron's going to score 30? You think that Juju Watkins is going to go for 35? Prize Picks lets you make your predictions and put your money where your mouth is in just 60 seconds. Now is the perfect time to join. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app, use code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. Win or lose, you get that bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. Howard Megdal here, Locked On Women's Basketball, talking to the Atlanta Dream head coach, Karl Smesko. And I want to talk in a couple of ways, right? One is that this is a very strange time for the league in terms of being able to plan long term, with the fact that we have the CBA that's about to expire and being negotiated as we speak, the fact that teams and players are really not signing deals that extend beyond 2025. In a lot of ways, there's stability at the top of the roster, like we've talked about, going into this year. But like every other team, there is this sort of open question. And so as you attack 2025, I'm wondering, how much are you doing it with an eye on making it clear and establishing a culture within a year for what for everyone is just going to be this free-for-all after there's a new agreement signed and 80% of the league is free agents? And how do you do that?
Exactly. That's something that every team's going to have to figure out. But I would start with, one thing we really believed at FGCU that I think hopefully carries over to Atlanta is you treat your players well. They see that they're cared about. They notice they're getting better. They're going to be part of a championship level program, in this case organization. And then a lot of the players will want to be part of that. So that's as there's all this fluctuations in terms of rosters in the future and contracts and things like that. You want to be a place where a player has to think about it because they heard what a great experience one of their former teammates had, or they the city is great, the organization really takes care of its players, the coach really cares about you. I mean, I think for us at FGCU, our best recruiters were our players, and so we're hoping that we have the type of organization that, one, is very successful, but two, that the players enjoy it. They see that they're getting better. They know they're cared about, and it's something that they would want to continue to be a part of.
And just related to success and related to the arc, it kind of changes the way any team can talk about these things too. Whenever there's a hiring, there's this idea, well, what does success look like over time? But in the way you talked about it with Dan and the way you think about it, is it very much because there are opportunities to get better right away, that there is just a 2025 focus, and then you kind of plan to look up and see where that is? Or do you have in your mind a 3-year, a 5-year plan here?
You have to have both. You have to have a short-term vision, and you realize that the people that you sign are likely going to be for 1 year, and you're every year going to have to be making adjustments in terms of whose contract is going to be up, and you have to be well planned for each year coming up and know what your needs are going to be, and how you're going to have to allocate resources. So I don't think you can lean in on one direction or the other too heavily. You have to be in a position to be good in the future, but at the same time, you are trying to maximize what you can do in the current season. So that's where you have Dan and Brooklyn. They coaches a lot of times just get tunnel visioned on the immediate year, and how can we compete for a championship this year, and let's do this, let's do that. And that's where you bounce things off the front office, and they're usually a little more measured, and it's like, okay, this is what we can do. This is the best team we can put out this year. We do have to factor in the future. There's going to be a following year and a year after that, and we have to best put ourselves in position to be successful those years as well.
It's a fascinating team altogether. Dan and Brooklyn are going to bring, like you said, those two visions to it as well. I know you will. Big win for the Atlanta Dream, if you'll permit a point of personal privilege for a host, but a bigger win, I would argue, for every 4 and 5 seed in America this coming year and for years to come. So, Karl Smesko, thank you so much for your time. To our listeners, thank you for making us your first listen every day. We'll be back with you tomorrow, as we are 6 days a week. Until then, I'm Howard Megdal, wishing all of you a wonderful day.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.